Welcome to the...
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
The Productivityist Podcast. We're at the midway point of the year. Now, I've done a lot of podcasting in my time, but I've always hit like lengthy periods, right? So work flowing, mics on mics lasted for almost 3 years. Discultured is still going, even though I've left it. But I've never really done a solo podcast that has lasted this long, the half year. I can't normally hold my own for that long. And I've got a couple of guests this week who are going to not just talk about productivity and maybe how they build everything into their workflow and how they make it all work, but also maybe to give me some tips, tricks, and how they're able to, build and deliver a regular podcast that's even more regular than this one. I've got Joel Boggess and Dr. Pei with me this week. Welcome to the show, guys.
Mike, you've been our guest a couple of times, I think, and this is the first time we have been on the Productivityist. Yeah. We are excited.
Yeah, this is and I figured the halfway mark of the year is a good time to have you on because I'm probably going to need some pointers. I probably needed pointers before I started because I've never really. The thing is I've never. I've always looked at podcasting as kind of like the secondary wing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like the secondary adjunct because I'm a writer first, right? But lately, I talk a lot more. I mean, not that anyone who's listened to the podcast goes, "Oh, Mike, you've always talked." But I'm actually speaking my blog posts a lot more than going back and refining them. I'm doing a lot more talks these days, workshops, that kind of thing, where I'm vocalizing my stuff, and I find that I can convey my message very effectively, vocally. And so I want to make the podcast an even more integral part of what I do. And I wanted to talk to you first off. We'll dive into how you make it happen. But right off the top, I know that when we were doing an email exchange, you said, I have some ideas of what you can do to make things a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So can you give me, let's start off with maybe, and we only got, I try to keep the show to that half hour mark. So can you maybe give me 3 things that I could do from first blush right away that will make the podcast better? Not just necessarily for the listener, of course, but also for anyone I'm bringing on.
Pei, go ahead and jump in right here.
Mike, if you don't mind, would you share what do you think as far as doing a podcast that it's been somewhat challenging for you? And honestly, what's unique, nothing's unique. What's challenging for you is very likely challenging for everybody. Because from production to, I don't know how often you have guests. You possibly do some solo and then have guests as well.
Yeah, the way I've been trying to structure it is every 4 weeks I do a solo show. So it's a weekly podcast. Every 3 out of the 4 weeks I have a guest. The 4th week it's normally a solo show. The episodes are largely unedited. If the phone rings in the background or something like that, I edit that out. I normally have the other person record on their side if they've got those capabilities. There's some guests who I either don't want to ask to do that because, I may be imposing on them in the first place. And then I do the post all in GarageBand. I've been able to build that for a while. My biggest challenge, of course, is, as you could probably imagine, especially with a daily podcast, but for a weekly, it's like, I turn around and the next week's already here. Now, I've got podcasts scheduled all the way out until, at this point, it'll be as we're recording this, there will be all the way until the end of March. And this show falls in somewhere between that, which is great. That's one thing I've improved upon, is I've never really been as proactive. And it's largely because of the shows I've worked on I couldn't because either the person I'm working with couldn't go that far in advance, or we just didn't want to make the shows as time. We wanted them to be more time sensitive. So a new product comes out, we want to talk about it, that kind of thing. So that's one area I think I've improved in. But I mean, one thing that I know I probably could improve upon is just when I'm talking to guests, like I don't want to over prepare them, but I think a bit more prep would probably be appropriate. Would you say so, guys?
I think personally, if Joel, if you don't mind me just jump in briefly. Here's what I see, because last year we actually launched a podcast mastermind, but before that we interviewed so many podcasters and asked them to share some struggles in podcasting and in their business. What we hear commonly are these. For example, define who their audience is. Some people feel like they do know, but then when we start to dig deeper, like, so how are you marketing this show? Once we start talking about marketing, they feel like, oh, this show is for everybody. It really is not. Because honestly, if you can define your target audience, then it takes you more, you'll be more focused with your marketing. It will actually, in a way, increase your productivity and your overall business growth.
Because you're not spending your time trying to cast such a wide net. You're focusing on the areas that people are, the people who you're going to be actually getting their ears in the show. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. What do you think of, and I know we saw each other at the podcast movement this year, and I think Patreon came up there at least once. The crowds, the sort of the patronage model. Now, I mean, there's advertisers out there and stuff like that. Obviously, I've dealt with advertisers before. What do you think of? And some of I actually have patrons for the podcast. What do you think about the patronage model when it comes to podcasting? Do you think it's something that people should be pursuing, or is it something that they should like? What's your thoughts on it in general?
So we're basically talking about monetizing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Patreon's a fairly new form of monetization because you're not asking advertisers. Instead, you're saying, hey, I'm going to make a podcast. Please, if you like the podcast and you like the show, please give money. It's kind of like a patronage model. So what do you think of that model, as well as, obviously the kind of, old school get advertisers, get sponsors kind of thing?
Sure. It's definitely an exciting model. And as long as you can build the value, and as you let people know, and on the front end, then it can be a turnkey.
I believe so, because if you ask some other people, and I think the answer is going to be very diverse, honestly, for you, Mike. Mm-hmm. But for us, we feel like as long as you provide value, you build up to where people feel, yeah, I'm getting value, and I'm it adds so much productivity and adds to my bottom line, and I tune in, yeah. Because people buy audiobooks.
Can I give you a real quick tip that I think will be of a lot of value to your audience?
Sure, absolutely. Please do.
Okay, here's an idea for immediate monetization, Mike. Your next guest, you could interview that guest for whatever your block of time is, and then you could release for free a portion of that interview. Mm-hmm. And for your paid elite members, the ones that are in your insiders community, mm-hmm. they get access to the full interview, plus whatever learning tools that expert brings to the table.
We've seen that model before too, right? With who is it? Jimmy Pardo does that. A few others do, where they'll do like half the podcast, and it's really like an hour-long conversation, but the first half hour is free. Or they edit it together, and then what they'll do is they'll put it behind a membership bracket, let's say. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's some good thoughts there too. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about. Because if I'm going to do is make some changes, and anytime you make a bit of a pivot or you add something new, would you consider that a form of a relaunch? Hence the name of your show, ReLaunch.
good one.
You know, a relaunch is kind of a continual thing. We always go through relaunches, and you know, some relaunches, you know, blast off and they soar, and other relaunches, you know, just like a bottle rocket. Remember those? Mm-hmm. They just kind of fizzle and don't go anywhere. So I think the idea, the concept of relaunching is a healthy part of the entrepreneurial experience. And, you know, Mike, I am excited that we're having this conversation, and actually we're talking about podcasting, and I actually didn't realize that you were going to go in this direction for today's show. But
because I didn't prepare you.
Well, no problem, because I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet here. But this is the year of the podcaster, and the people that are on the top of the curve, you know, people like you and people, you know, in your audience, they're going to be able to ride this massive wave that is going to wash all over all of us, you know, and we can be a part of it. And I know you're a part of it. Or, you know, we can just kind of let it pass us by. But, you know, entrepreneurs that are on top of their game they see this wave on the horizon, and they are taking full advantage of it. And I know you're one of them. So that's why I'm so excited that the world is going on demand at your fingertips. 70% of our listeners listen on their phone. Hello, that says something.
Yeah. Now I want to tie in productivity a bit more here, because I can't, you know, the daily podcast sounds appealing in one capacity and totally not in another. There's a couple of reasons for that. And because I know it's big, and I know I've seen fluctuations, I'm sure you have too, where it's been like, okay, we're going to do 90-minute podcasts, and then all of a sudden those got overwhelming, and now we're seeing shorter length podcasts, and we're seeing seasons now, right? Like, look at, I mean, Serial is not
right.
I wouldn't use them as the. I mean, most people are like, oh, Serial, they're doing. No, we've seen seasons of podcasts before. It's not. They just happen to be, you know, powered by NPR and Ira Glass and all. And it's been a fantastic show, make no mistake. But it's still, I mean, it's not new. It's just being thrust into the spotlight. How in the world? First off, two questions. How in the world are you able to generate as many shows as you can and keep them at the level of quality that they are at, number one? And number two, is it any different, really? I'm probably answering the question. Is it any different than someone who blogs daily, and that you're just placing your focus in the art of audio creation as opposed into the art of, say, blogging?
That is a fantastic question. One of the things that Pei and I learned early on in this game is to batch your tasks. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're an expert at this stuff. But, you know, what we do on Friday, and that's just the day that we pick. There's nothing really magical about Friday. But we are in the studio from roughly noon to about 6 o'clock in the evening, and we are just cranking out shows, one right after the other. And we not only crank them out, but we also edit them. Right there in between shows, in between our guests. And that makes tremendous use of our time since we're already there.
Right.
And then on Saturday, then we'll do a lot of the and most of the post-production type work. So our goal is to get those things knocked out, because those are things that we have to do. And then for the week, as it starts on Monday, then we're able to market, to promote, to do things that'll advance our business. Jump in, Pei.
Yeah, and another aspect of this is when we added the show, we honestly do not spend much time trying to take out the you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we gave up on that a long time ago.
Well, you want the organic conversational components there. I mean, I think if you are doing that all the time, then yes, of course, you're going to want to maybe get rid of some of the hiccups. But I mean, if it's a discussion, there's natural human cadence in the voice that you're going to see happening. And you also can't control, like when you have guests, you can't control I mean, we've all had guests that either speak slower or more deliberate, or, you know, they may be a bit nervous. I mean, I think you have to keep that authenticity there, right?
Yes. And here's a tip. What we do when we edit a show during that time of re-listening, the goal is really not to criticize how the conversation went, because most of the time it's great value. It's new. Sometimes we feel like, oh, I heard that before, but not necessarily for your listeners. Mm-hmm. But when we listen and edit, we actually focus on how we can write marketing copy to market this show.
So you're listening to it with different ears, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. See, it's funny. One of the things when I first started podcasting, I did, and I think I talked to you about this when I appeared on your podcast, is I used to do like productivity parody. So I did like satire, and I interviewed Seth Godin for the podcast. And I was surprised. All I did, and again, this is probably a tip that we all could say is, and you've landed some pretty amazing guests. And I'm betting that the biggest tip you could offer is just ask. The worst thing they can say is no. But Seth Godin said yes. He appeared on the show, and I thought it was the worst interview ever because I told him I did the whole like pre-interview thing where I said, look, I'm going to be this arrogant, uninformed idiot. You're going to have to follow you basically playing like a Stephen Colbert type character. And he said, yep, I got it. And we did the interview, and I thought, oh man, it was not good. I listened back to it, and he got it, and he played along so well, and it was one of the better interviews I've done, even to this day, because the guest was on board. And I think that we'll always, and again, as somebody who used to perform, and still does to a certain extent, you're always going to be your own worst critic, right? Whenever you put something out there, you're always going to be like, oh man, I could have. But the thing is, it's like when I did theater, if you forget a line, just keep going, because the only person that knows you've forgotten a line are your stage mates and yourself. The audience has no clue. So that's being a pro. That's what being a pro is. Absolutely.
And another thing, when you earlier mentioned compared to somebody who blogs every day, and here's the thing, Joel loves to write, but he absolutely loves podcasting because he had a radio background. He was in the radio business back in his when he was in his early 20s. So, it's about, he is alive behind the mic. So you really have to tap into what works for you, what makes you feel like this is a play. So the day actually goes by fast, not like a drag.
Do you stand up when you podcast? Or do you
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Have you done because when I'm moving to the new office, as we're recording this, we're getting some renovations done downstairs. For the way renovations work, who knows? By the time this airs, we still could be getting renovations done downstairs. But I'm contemplating, because I've got a desk boom, which means I could stand, and I'm contemplating standing again because I have a standing desk, but there's just something I've found, and again, like you said, Pei, it's whatever works for you about that animation. When you're standing, there's an energy there. I don't know. Maybe, I know it's not just me, but I was just curious if you worked in radio, so radio, you're sitting. I did radio for a while too. And yeah,
sure. We were sitting for a while, but they actually renovated our studio and it became, we stood behind our control panel.
Really?
So they actually did that when I was in terrestrial radio. However, I see the power in standing, and I do a lot of my coaching calls standing up. You probably do the same thing because there is a certain authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the pharmacist looking down on the. I'm just kidding. It's not quite like that. Not
quite like that. But there's a certain certainty.
Yep.
In your words. I personally, when I podcast though, I like to sit down, and that's generally that is how we roll currently. But I can definitely see, and I've experienced the benefits in standing.
Now, when you guys were because you've gone through a couple iterations of the show, I would say. Would a couple be fair? Or
this is our fourth.
I was going to say. So almost a few at this point. What is it? Just trial and error, or is it like, and you just get better and you build workflows? Because you've got to. You said Friday. Friday's the day where you go in and batch. And what I'll do after we're done recording here, because I like to theme by almost like moods or modes, is right now, I mean, today has been all coaching calls for me, and I've done 2 other podcast recordings. I've already edited 2 of them down, and I'll probably, right after we're done, because it's fresh in my mind, I'll know, okay, this is where the cutoff, this is where the call began, this is where it ended. I just am in that mode. So it took a while for me to get to that point. I'm imagining that just the idea of framing your show and marketing it and understanding what works best to make the show and your efforts as successful as possible wasn't something that happened, like that.
My goodness, Mike, Joe was kind of laughing as you were asking. Honestly, if we listen to our shows, just let's say right now, 8 months ago.
Yeah, let's listen to the first show we did with Mike. I mean, it's.
Oh, we're like, seriously?
Yeah.
Is that how we interacted with our guests? It's just like blogging. I mean, you write better.
Sure.
You know your language. You know your audience better.
You got to be willing to suck at something until you suck less. And I'm hoping that's kind of what we've grown into, to be able to do this where we're actually sucking less or we're actually good at this. But you just got to be willing to go out there and take your practice swings until you get it right. And I had no doubt that this podcast, once we were able to line it up just right, would be able to knock it out of the park. And that's what we did. And, we had to go through the minor leagues, and we had to, take the swings and take the misses. And we went through, it was Finding Your Voice. We did that show for a little while, did about 200 episodes there. We did Raise Your Game, not quite so much. We did, there was another one in there.
Powerful Living.
We did Powerful Living.
Sharing Your Voice.
Yeah, Sharing Your Voice. I mean,
Real Good Health.
Real Good Health. I mean, just, but we had fun with it.
Well, it's a process, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Before I let you go, because I know we have more talking to do, but just with other people. Where can people find your show, and where can they learn more about what you do?
Sure. Thanks for asking. ReLaunchShow.com is the best place to go. All of our episodes, we released episode 207 of Relaunch this morning. Monday through Saturday, every single episode is on our site, and all of our resources are there, not just for Relaunch, but also for our Amazon best-selling book, Finding Your Voice. That is also available.
And resources for podcasters on launch strategies and growth strategies.
Yes.
That's awesome. I want to have you guys back on the show again in the maybe at the year mark. Maybe once I've hit that year mark, we'll have back and see what and then you can do another intervention. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.